My name is Claire Ashford. I'm 34, and last Christmas my own mother stood in the farmhouse I had secretly bought to save from foreclosure and told my 7-year-old daughter to get her coat. The table went silent. My sister leaned back and said it slow enough for everyone to hear. "This house isn't yours anymore, Claire. Don't bother coming back." My mother nodded like she was agreeing about the weather. "We'll all have a much nicer Christmas without the two of you here." I looked down at Nora's hand in mine. Then I walked to the table and set down a plain folder, right between the mashed potatoes and the good china. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I smiled, because nobody in that room knew what was inside it, or that within 5 minutes both of them would be begging me to take back every word. If you've ever poured yourself into a family that only remembered you when they needed something, stay with me. To understand what was in that folder, you have to go back 1 year. A year before that Christmas, my life ran on 2 schedules, the hospital's and my daughter's. I worked as a hospice nurse outside Renton and picked up travel contracts whenever money got tight, which was often. Nora and I rented a cramped 2-bedroom above a hardware store downtown. The radiator banged all night, but it was mine, and nobody could take it from me. Every Sunday I drove 20 minutes out to Ashgrove to the farmhouse where I grew up. My father built the back porch with his own hands. He planted a blue spruce beside the barn the year I was born, and it stood taller than the roofline now. My mother, Diane, 63 and 2 years widowed, still lived there alone. She used to call me her steady one, and for years I mistook that for love. It was really a job description. Being the steady one meant I wasn't the daughter they called on holidays. I was the one they called when the furnace died, when the taxes came due, when a card maxed out. I kept a quiet tally in my head. Something in this family had been running on my paycheck, and no one had ever asked my permission. For over a year I'd quietly held my family's finances together. I paid the overdue heating bill in February. I covered my mother's property taxes that spring, nearly $800, so the county wouldn't put a lien on the land. I replaced the water heater in June. None of it was a loan, loans get repaid, and I'd stopped pretending. I wasn't naive, and I wasn't a pushover. I'd stopped handing over cash because cash disappeared and the story always changed. I paid vendors directly and kept every receipt. That Thanksgiving, they had dinner without us. Nobody called to invite us. I found out from a photo my aunt posted my mother at the head of the table, my sister carving the turkey, an empty chair that should have been mine. The next morning at 7 my phone rang. My mother didn't ask how our holiday went. She asked if I could cover the oil delivery, $210 before the tank ran dry. I paid it before I finished my coffee. Forgotten on Thursday, needed by Friday. Being useful had quietly replaced being loved, and I was the last one to notice the switch. You might wonder why I kept driving out there. The answer was 7 years old and sang along to the radio in my back seat. Nora loved that farmhouse the way I once had the blue spruce, the crooked barn, the paper star she hung on the tree every December. I'd lost my own father 2 years earlier. In a hospital bed I wasn't allowed to nurse him in because I was too close to it. Near the end, he held my hand and made me promise one thing. Keep the home in this family, Claire. Whatever happens, keep them a home, I promised. I was the kind of daughter who kept promises, even the expensive ones. So I kept driving out, letting Nora run the fields, fixing what broke, paying what was owed, telling myself I was honoring him. I believe I was. But a promise can become a leash when the people on the other end decide to pull it. That winter, I still thought love and duty pointed the same direction. I was about to learn they can split apart. My sister Renee made everything look effortless. 37, married to a farm equipment salesman named Grant, and from the outside their life gleamed: a new SUV, a boat they used twice a summer, 2 kids in matching coats, a kitchen remodel my mother bragged about at church. I never envied any of it. What I couldn't square was the math. Grant worked commission, and the farms around Ashgrove were shrinking. Renee worked part-time at a dentist's office. Their lifestyle cost more than their income explained. I once overheard her on the phone at my mother's. Her voice dropped low, repeating the word minimum as in minimum payment. She hung up and smiled too fast. "Just juggling," she said. "You know how it is." I did know. I knew the sound of someone standing on a floor that's giving way while insisting it's solid. My mother believed the painting completely. Renee was the successful one. I was just reliable. It's a strange thing, being the daughter who actually paid the bills and still being the lesser story. I let it go. That habit was going to cost me. My work kept everything else in proportion. Hospice nursing does that. You sit with people at the end and they tell you the truth because they've run out of reasons to lie. That December, I had a patient named Arthur, 81, lungs failing, his family visiting less each week. One night it was just the two of us, snow falling past the window. He gripped my hand and whispered, "I spent my whole life giving them money. I should have given them my time. They'd have remembered that." I thought about my ledger of furnace bills and the empty chair at Thanksgiving. I told myself I gave both money and time. But sitting in that dim room, I felt the first cold draft of a question I'd been avoiding. What exactly was I buying with all of it? My pager buzzed before I could chase the thought further, and I let the work pull me under, the way I always did. The call that changed everything came by accident. Eliner Voss had been my father's lawyer for 30 years and his friend longer. 70 now, sharp as a scalpel. She called to ask if I'd reviewed the paperwork on the farmhouse. I said I didn't know what paperwork she meant. A careful pause. "Claire, you know the house is in trouble, don't you?" I did not. The mortgage my parents had taken years back was months behind. The bank had sent a notice of default. Without a change, the property would go to auction that spring. I stood in my kitchen and the room seemed to tilt. My mother had told me nothing, all while I quietly paid $200 for heating oil as the entire house slid toward the auction block. "Who's handling it?" I asked. "Your mother says Renee is," Eliner said. "But Claire, I haven't seen Renee do a single thing and time is short." I hung up and stood there listening to the radiator knock. "Renee is handling it." That phrase had a smell to it now, like a wound going bad under a clean bandage. I got Nora's coat. I told her we were taking a drive to Grandma's, even though it was dark and not Sunday. I needed to look my mother in the eye. The farmhouse windows glowed yellow when we pulled in. My mother's first look wasn't warmth, it was calculation, quick and gone. I asked about the mortgage. She waved it off exactly the way Renee waved off the minimum payments. "Don't you worry about grown-up things." I told her I'd spoken to Eliner. I watched the word foreclosure land, watched her face crack for half a second before the mask went back on. "Now don't make a scene," she said, soft and injured. "You always overreact. Renee has a plan." What plan, she couldn't say. She talked around it, how Renee and Grant knew people at the bank, how I always had to control everything. Classic, when you can't answer the question, put the questioner on trial. "Mom, the auction is in the spring. Does Renee understand that?" She lifted her chin. "Renee understands more than you think." I looked at that stubborn, frightened face and understood something cold. She wasn't going to let me help through the front door. Whatever I did, I'd have to do quietly from the outside. I kissed her cheek because I still loved her and drove home already deciding to save a house whose owner didn't want to be saved. That night, after Nora was asleep, I opened the savings account I never touched, 3 years of travel contracts, night shifts in cities where I knew no one, eating cheap so the balance could grow. I did the math slow and twice. What it would take to stop an auction. Whether a single nurse with good credit could stand in that crowd and win. The numbers were tight but not impossible. I wouldn't beg my mother to let me pay her mortgage, she'd only refuse, or let Renee take the credit or spend it on something else. If the house was going to auction, I'd go to the auction. I'd buy it clean in my own name and when it was truly safe, give it back as a gift. Mortgage gone, free and clear. A Christmas nobody would forget. I told no one, not Eliner, beyond what she needed, not my mother, not Renee. Telling no one was my first mistake. It was also the only weapon they left me, because you cannot betray a secret you were never told. Eliner laid the files out on her desk like an X-ray. The default was real. Come spring, unless the balance was cured, the property would sell at auction. "There's only one clean way to protect it," she said. "Stand at the auction and win it with financing in place. Cash and paper, no handshakes." She asked what I understood I was signing up for. I said I did. I asked her not to tell my mother or sister and she nodded slowly. "Your father worried about this," she said. "Money and this family." "He worried a lot." I asked what she meant. She just squared the files and said we'd get to that when the time was right. Winning at auction meant more money than I had sitting still, so I did the only thing I knew. I worked. An agency had a contract open 4 hours away, 8 weeks, crisis pay, night shifts in a short-staffed cardiac unit. It meant leaving Nora with my neighbor Faye on weekdays and driving home exhausted just to hold her. I took it without hesitating. Later, when they painted me as cold, everything I did that winter I did for a 7-year-old and a blue spruce and a promise to a dying man. I video called Nora every night from a bare rented room. Some nights she cried and asked when I was coming home. I banked everything, ate rice, worked doubles, let the balance climb toward the number a leaner and I had set. By the time the 8 weeks ended, I had just barely enough. I remember driving home that last morning, sun coming up, thinking the hard part was behind me. I had no idea saving the house was the easy half. The auction was held on the courthouse steps in March, gray old snow crusting the sidewalks. Maybe a dozen people, mostly investors with clipboards, looking at the farmhouse the way butchers look at cattle. Hearing them mutter about lot size nearly broke me. My father's porch, my mother's kitchen, Nora's tree, reduced to a spreadsheet line. The bidding climbed. A man in a puffy vest bid against me, then a woman with an investment firm's folder. I kept my face still, thinking of every night shift that built the money I was spending. When the woman finally shook her head, the auctioneer called it twice and brought the gavel down. Sold to me. I signed the paperwork that afternoon, hands shaking so hard I had to steady it against the desk. The deed would read Claire Ashford, sole owner. Not my mother, not Renee, me. I sat in my car afterward and cried, not about the money, but because the blue spruce was safe, the porch was safe, and I'd kept my promise to my father with my own 2 hands, quietly, completely alone. All that was left now was the sweet part, giving it back. I imagined my mother's face when she understood the house was saved. It kept me warm for months. It was never going to happen the way I pictured it. A smarter woman might have announced it right away. I didn't, because some quiet instinct told me to hold my cards until I understood the whole board. So I said nothing. My mother went on living in the farmhouse, believing Renee's mysterious plan had worked. Through the spring and summer I kept quietly clearing debts, a nagging credit card in my mother's name, $1,100, and a small business loan with Renee's and Grant's names on it that was about to go to collections and drag my mother's credit down. I never told them. I just took the weights off one at a time and filed the statements. By summer I didn't just own the house, I held the paper on nearly every debt that touched my family. Pulling that business loan's payoff statement showed me the first crack. The original amount was far larger than any equipment salesman's household should have needed. They hadn't borrowed for a vacation. They'd borrowed like people plugging a hole in a sinking boat. I saw the crack widen at a 4th of July cookout. I'd stepped into the back hall for a bandage when I heard Grant and Renee through the mudroom door. "We're out of time," he said. "The refinance is the only thing that fixes this, and we can't do it without the property." Renee hushed him. "It's handled. Mom's on board. She's practically promised it to us already." A kid ran through and they broke apart, smiling again. I stood there with a cartoon bandage, stomach turning. Refinance the property. Promised it to us. There was one enormous problem with their plan, and I was the only person at that cookout who knew it. The farmhouse wasn't my mother's to promise. It had been mine since March. As fall came on, the Sunday visits got harder to schedule. My mother was suddenly busy or tired or had plans with Renee's family. In November, my Aunt Joyce called, fishing gently. "You're coming to Christmas dinner, aren't you?" "Of course," I said. There was a pause. "It's just your mother's been talking about a family meeting that night. Something about the house. I assumed you were part of it." "First I'm hearing of it," I said. In her silence I heard everything she was too kind to say. Nora wandered in just then, holding up a crayon drawing, the farmhouse, lopsided and bright, with a green triangle beside it. "That's Grandpa's tree," she said. "That's where we have Christmas." Something in my chest went hard and clear as ice. Whatever they were planning it around my daughter's Christmas. I went back to Alina to prepare what I still, even then, thought of as a gift. I had her draft a quitclaim deed transferring the farmhouse back to my mother, free and clear. I wrote real checks, one to zero out the credit card, one, the big one, to cover the exact balance behind Renee and Grant's desperate refinance. My idea was simple. At the Christmas meeting, I'd hand my mother the deed to her saved home. Hand Renee a check that made the refinance unnecessary. Alina watched me arrange it and went quiet. "You're a better daughter than they deserve," she said. Then she slid one more thing across the desk, an envelope, worn soft, my father's handwriting on the front. "He left this with me," she said. "Told me to give it to you when the house came into question." I read my father's letter that night alone at my kitchen table. His handwriting was shakier, written near the end. He wrote that he knew his body was failing and was afraid, not of dying, but of what would happen to us after. "You were always the one who gave," he wrote. "Your mother knows it, and your sister knows it, and I'm ashamed to say we all leaned on it. When I'm gone, this family will circle around whatever's left, and around this house." Grief makes some people generous and some people greedy, and I'm afraid I know which way the wind blows here. Then the lines I've never forgotten. Keep the home if you can, Claire, but don't let anyone spend your whole life keeping themselves warm. You are not a bank. You are my daughter. And if it ever comes down to choosing between this family's comfort and that little girl of yours, you choose her, every time, without 1 second of guilt. That's not permission. That's an order. My father's order changed how I moved through those last weeks. For the first time, I started saying no. Renee called in early December, honeyed, and asked to borrow $4,000. A year earlier, I'd have found a way to say yes. This time I heard my father's voice. I can't do that, Renee, I said, simple and level. A long silence. Wow, she said finally, flat and cold. I didn't think you of all people would turn on family. As if declining was betrayal, while whatever she was planning was just business. She hung up without goodbye. My hands, I noticed, were steady. I found out within the week what the bigger lever was, and it wasn't aimed at me, it was aimed at my fitness as a mother. My cousin Faye called, circling awkwardly, until it came out. Someone in the family had been saying I was working myself into the ground, neglecting Nora, unstable, running off on mysterious trips, maybe not fit to raise a child alone. I already knew the trips were the travel contracts I'd taken to save this family's house. Every fact had been true, and every meaning had been poisoned. Someone had taken the exact sacrifices I'd made and rewired them into a case against me. Renee needed me not just refused, but discredited, because a reliable sister with money was a threat, and an unstable one was easy to freeze out. I understood then the fight wasn't about a building. It was about whether they could make me small enough to throw away. I stopped reacting and started charting the whole situation like a patient history. Renee and Grant were drowning in debt that couldn't wait. Their one lifeline was a refinance that needed the farmhouse as collateral. To get it, they needed my mother to sign it over, and needed me discredited so I couldn't object. It was a decent plan, with one enormous flaw. The house wasn't my mother's to give. It was mine, free of the mortgage they didn't even know had been cleared. My mother could stand up and promise the farmhouse, and it would mean nothing, because you cannot give away what you don't own. The final piece clicked into place a week before Christmas. Aunt Joyce called again, not fishing this time, warning me. She'd been at the farmhouse when my mother laid it out over coffee. My mother intended to use Christmas dinner to announce she was giving the farmhouse to Renee and Grant. A gift, formal, witnessed, papers ready. She thinks she's being a good mother, Joyce said, disgusted. She has no idea what Renee is really up to. And Claire, they're planning for you not to be there long. I sat very still. My mother was about to give away a house she no longer owned, promised with papers and witnesses to a daughter secretly bankrupt, based on a lie about the daughter who'd actually saved it. And I was the only one at that table who'd know none of it was real. The fear left me. I wasn't walking into an ambush. I was walking into a play where I'd already read the last page. So now there was a date on it, Christmas. 9 days away, then 7, then 4, I could have skipped it. Skipping meant letting the lie win by default. Instead, I prepared the way I prepare for a hard shift. Eleanor confirmed it all cold and legal. My mother could not transfer a house she didn't own. Any papers she signed would be worthless. Eleanor agreed to come to dinner, quietly, as my guest, in case the truth needed a witness who couldn't be called a liar. I spent those last days baking with Nora and wrapping gifts for everyone at that table, including Renee and Grant, a scarf, work gloves, chosen back when I still hoped I was wrong. 3 days before Christmas, Renee tried once more, wrapped in concern. This year's been so hard on you, she said. May. Be Christmas at the farmhouse is too much. Why don't you and Nora do something quiet? Mom and I can handle everything. It was almost artful, freezing us out dressed up as looking after me. That's thoughtful, I said, matching her tone, but Nora's been looking forward to Grandpa's tree all year. We'll be there. A pause, colder now, suit yourself. My pager went off, a real emergency, and I drove to work thinking about her words. Make it easy on you. She wasn't offering an easy Christmas. She was offering a quiet exit, so the theft could happen without an inconvenient witness. I ran into Grant the day before Christmas Eve at the hardware store beneath my apartment. Big Christmas out at the farmhouse this year, he said, casual and cruel. Real milestone for us. Takes a certain kind of family to hold on to a place like that, he added. No offense. I could have told him right there that the place he was spending in his head already belonged to me. Instead I said, you're right, Grant. It does take a certain kind of family, and let him walk out pleased with himself. A man walking confidently toward a cliff he couldn't see. Christmas Eve morning, I sat with Alina one last time. The deed was clean and recorded. The house was mine, no promise could change that. The debts were documented to the penny. Legally, she said, you hold every card at that table. The only question left is what kind of person you want to be when you play them. I could walk in and be cruel, evict my mother into the snow, exactly as they'd meant to do to Nora and me. Some part of me wanted to, but I heard my father again. Choose the child. He never once said become them. I would tell the truth publicly and completely. I would protect Nora first. I would not let the liars keep their prize. But I would not put innocent people in the cold to do it, and there were innocents here. I know what kind of person I want to be, I told Alina. Before I left, she told me the last piece, the one that turned my sadness into something harder. Renee had already consulted an attorney of her own, not about the loan, about me. Whether our mother could legally exclude me, whether my instability could be documented in case I made trouble. My own sister had sat in a lawyer's office exploring how to prove I was unfit, while smiling at me on the phone and offering me a quiet Christmas. I let myself feel the full weight of it once, in my car, so I wouldn't feel it later when I needed to be steady. This was the deepest cut, and it hadn't even come from my mother. I wiped my eyes exactly once and started the car. Christmas morning, Nora woke me at 6, vibrating with joy. We opened small gifts, just the two of us, the art set she'd circled in the catalog, a book about horses. We baked sugar cookies shaped like stars, because Nora insisted we bring some to share. We wrapped every gift, including the ones for Renee and Grant. Grandma's going to love the tree topper, Nora said, because we'd bought a new gold star to replace the bent one on the farmhouse tree. I watched her curl the ribbon, tongue poking out in concentration, and thought, they have no idea who they're dealing with. Not me, her. The farmhouse was lit up like a postcard, every window gold, cars packed along the drive. Inside it was loud and warm and full, Renee and Grant, their 2 kids, cousins, Aunt Joyce, church friends invited to witness my mother's big moment. The blue spruce stood under fresh snow, and Nora ran to press her mittens against it before we even got inside. I carried in the cookies and the folder and felt the room adjust around me, the small stiffening, the traded glances. Claire, my mother said, kissing the air near my cheek, you made it. She sounded like a woman whose plans had hit a snag. Alina arrived quietly in a gray coat. My mother blinked, confused, before manners took over. She came as my guest, I said, and left it there. As the meal wound toward dessert, my mother caught my arm in the hallway by the coats. I think it's best if you and Nora head home before we do the family part, she said. I asked what the family part was. It's just going to be complicated, she said, not meeting my eyes. Renee and Grant have some news, it's more for the settled part of the family. As if Nora and I were a rough draft. You're asking me to take my daughter and leave, on Christmas, I said. Don't make it dramatic, she said. We'll have a nicer time, all of us, if it's simple. I might have kept it together if Nora hadn't come looking for me and heard more than a 7-year-old should. She stood at the end of the hall in her Christmas dress, holding the gold star. Mommy, she said, is it because we're not real family? The hallway went silent. Every soft feeling I had left went quiet and cold, like a monitor flatlining. My father's words rose up in me. Choose the child. Every time, without 1 second of guilt. I knelt and fixed the bow on her dress and said, loud enough to carry, no, baby, it's not yo. You come on, let's go say something to everyone first. Then I stood, took her hand, and walked us both into the dining room. Room was full and bright, candles lit, conversation dropping as we stepped in. My mother hurried after us, flustered, and pushed through anyway. Since we're all here, she announced, Renee and Grant have wonderful news and I have a gift to make it official. I've decided to sign the farmhouse over to them. Grant sat back, proud. Renee's eyes flicked to Nora, and she went for the kill in front of everyone. Maybe it's for the best if Claire sits this one out, she said. This is for the settled part of the family. This house isn't yours, Claire. Don't ever come back. My mother nodded, relieved someone else had said it. We'll have a better Christmas without you. There they were, both sentences, out loud in front of witnesses, exactly as I told you at the start. Aunt Joyce gasped. Nora's hand tightened in mine. I felt something almost like peace because they'd finally said it in public, the cruelty they'd only ever whispered before. I didn't argue. I walked to the table and set my folder down between the gravy and the good china. All right, I said. Then you won't mind what I'm about to do. This is a deed, I said, laying it flat, my voice low and even, it's for this house. And the name on it isn't Mom's, it's mine. My mother laughed nervously. Claire, don't be ridiculous, this is my house. It was going to auction in the spring, Mom, default. Nobody told me. Eleanor did, so I took 3 years of travel contract savings and stood at that auction in March and bought this house free and clear in my name. Silence, the real kind. Grant went rigid. Renee's face did something complicated. That's not, my mother started and stopped. Eleanor spoke from the wall. It's recorded at the county courthouse. I filed it myself. Claire has owned this property since March. You can't sign over what you don't own. My mother sank into her chair. I reached back into the folder, a quitclaim deed. Do you know what this is? She shook her head, dazed. This is a gift, I said. It signs the house back to you, Mom, free of the mortgage because I already paid it off. Yours again, clean for the rest of your life. That was your Christmas present. I was going to hand it to you tonight and never mention what it cost me. A wounded sound escaped her. I turned to Renee and drew out a signed check. You've been drowning. I know about the refinance. I know about the loan I already cleared for you last spring, the one about to go to collections. You never even knew. This check covers the rest. All of it. I was going to erase it tonight so you'd never need this house or anyone's signature. Renee rose halfway, eyes fixed on the check. Claire, wait, let's talk about this. We're family, we really need that check. Things have been so hard. An hour earlier she'd told my daughter she wasn't real family. Now urgently she was family again because there was money on the table. I held it where she could see it. You're right, I said, calm as still water. You do need this. It would fix everything. You'd be free. Hope leapt into her face. Then slowly, looking her in the eye, I tore the check in half. This was yours, I said, letting the pieces fall. Right up until you looked at my daughter and told her she wasn't real family. That's the line, Renee, not the money, her. Renee came apart, screaming that I was cruel, jealous, that I'd ruined Christmas, blaming everyone but the woman in the mirror. I stood quiet, holding Nora's hand, and let the table watch who'd actually lost their composure. My mother reached, trembling, for the quitclaim deed still on the table. Claire, you can still give me this. Please, I'm your mother. Nothing about Nora. Not one flicker of sorry for the child she'd just let be cast into the snow. I folded the deed and put it back in the folder. I was going to give you your home back tonight, no strings, I said quietly. But you looked at your own granddaughter on Christmas and told me to take her home so the settled part of the family could enjoy the house I saved. So no, Mom, not tonight. Grant stood, red-faced, reaching for threat. This is ridiculous, you can't just, we'll get our own lawyer, we'll fight this. Eleanor stepped forward, unhurried. Please do consult one, Mr. Prescott. Here's what a lawyer will tell you. The auction was public and lawful. The sale is final. The deed is recorded. There's nothing to contest because nothing was taken from you, you never owned it. As for the debts, they were paid at Claire's discretion, fully documented. She was under no obligation, and she is under none now. Grant sat back down, and on some level, he already knew there was no lawsuit coming. I didn't come here tonight to take anything, I said into the silence. I came to give. I spent a year and everything I had keeping this family's roof up because my father asked me to keep us a home. You turned a gift into a fig. HT, not me. You did that when you decided my daughter and I were the part of the family you could throw away. I touched my father's letter without reading it aloud. Before he died, he told me to keep the home if I could, and to choose my daughter over this family's comfort, every time, without guilt. You made that choice easy tonight. Mom, I said, softer now, you're not going anywhere. This is your home for as long as you live, but we'll do it properly with a written agreement. You'll cover your own share honestly, no more secrets about the bills. Take those terms and you keep your home. She nodded, weeping, because there was nothing else to do. Then I crossed to Renee's 2 children, frozen by the tree, too young to understand any of it. None of this is about you, I told them gently. You're my family, and you always will be. I handed them the gifts I'd wrapped, and told them there was something set aside for their future too. Renee watched me be kind to her kids while she sat in the ruins of her own plan, and I think that was harder for her than the torn check. I gathered Nora's coat and her gold star, still unhung, and we walked toward the door. Behind us, the scramble started. Claire, wait please, let's talk, my mother's voice climbing. Renee right behind her, the honey back and running fast. We can fix this. We're sisters. An hour earlier they couldn't get us out the door fast enough. Now they were begging us to stay. I paused at the door. You said you'd have a better Christmas without me, I said. Go on and have it. Aunt Joyce hugged me hard on her way over and whispered that my father would be proud, and that she was coming by next week, whether I liked it or not. Nora and I stepped out onto the porch into the falling snow. Mommy, she said, can we still come see Grandpa's tree sometimes? I looked at the blue spruce, dark and huge and safe under the snow, on land I'd bought back with my own two hands. Whenever you want, baby, I said, it's your home too now. On our terms. The weeks after were quieter than you'd think. My mother signed the written agreement in January and for the first time paid her own honest share. We spoke sometimes, carefully, like two people learning a new language. Renee and Grant faced their debt without me to bail the boat, and I didn't sink them and I didn't save them. I simply stepped out of a role I'd never agreed to play. Grant never did call a lawyer. Renee sent one long text in February, full of the old blame, and I read it once and didn't answer. Aunt Joyce came by every week, just like she promised, and became the grandmother figure Nora deserved. Nora and I had our own Christmas late, just the two of us, with our star and our cookies. Then on a bright, cold Sunday in the new year, we drove out to Ash Grove and walked up to the blue spruce, and Nora reached as high as she could, and I lifted her, and she set the gold star on a branch of my father's tree. They had their Christmas without me that night. I had a better one a few days later, with the only family that never once asked what I was worth before deciding I belonged at the table. That's the trade I'd make again 100 times. A house full of people who needed me for a home, however small, full of the two who simply love me. Here's what that Christmas taught me, and it's the only lesson I'll hand you. Family isn't the people who show up when you're useful and vanish when you're not. Family is the ones who'd still want you at the table when you've got nothing left to give them. And if a child ever has to stand in a hallway and ask whether she's real family, you already have your answer. It was never about her. It was about them. Choose the child, every single time. That's my story. 1 year of quiet work, one deed with my name on it, and a little girl who will never have to ask that question again. If your worth was ever measured by what you could give, let this be your sign to draw the line today, out loud, the way I finally did. The last thing I remember from that Sunday is the snow starting again over Ash Grove, soft and slow, and my daughter's gold star catching the light on my father's tree, steady on a branch that was finally, safely, ours.